So this is our first tree of our first tree walk, or my first tree walk. And so a few things. Unfortunately, I'm right here by the freeway, so there's going to be a lot of noise. But as we move along, or I move along, I'll be further away. So our first tree here is right by the campus, near, if you park and tent, near a drought-tolerant nursery, or drought-resistant, one of those two. So this is our first tree. This is silver dollar gum, or Eucalyptus polyanthemus. So it's from Australia. It's a popular eucalyptus. Eucalyptus get a bad name because of the blue gum, which is the huge eucalyptus, and you see them in large groves, and people mostly hate them, but they're trees and they're doing some benefit to the environment. But this one is very different. It's a smaller tree. The color is quite different. It's a gray-green foliage. I think it's a nice tree. So we'll talk about this tree. So it's from, like I said, Australia. It's evergreen, or probably more evergray, or evergreen gray. And it grows up to about 75 feet. This one might be, 60 feet, probably a 30-foot spread. So it's got multi-trunks. It got 3 trunks. But let's walk over and look at the foliage. Well, actually, let me just walk around it a little bit so you can see. The tree right underneath it is an olive. So it could be dense or quite open. So a lot of eucalyptus have juvenile foliage that's different from the mature foliage. So here's some juvenile foliage down here at the base, and this is a tree that some florists used juvenile foliage for arrangements. But it's called silver dollar gum, I guess, because somewhat silver and maybe a dollar coin. Really nice foliage. So the juvenile foliage is opposite, but the alternate, the mature foliage is going to be alternate leaf arrangement. We'll talk about that in another class. But so opposite would mean that on the stem or twig, the leaves are opposite each other, whereas alternate, there's one leaf, and then on the other side, a little bit higher above, is another leaf. So it's good to know we're not going to see any trees like this with this type of foliage today, or even other trees. There are the flower capsules, they're usually about 7 in a cluster, and the flowers are usually about a cream color. So here's the bark. So it could be smooth. Sometimes it's kind of fibrous, usually intact. But sometimes when eucs get older, the bark is a little more flaky. So this is a tree that can grow almost anywhere. Really rocky, poor soils. In Australia, I guess it grows in either like swampy areas or really dry areas. It needs full sun. As far as diseases, it is resistant to verticillium, another disease we'll be talking about that affects a lot of trees. Actually, right next to it, the olive is really susceptible to verticillium. So kind of upright main branches, and then kind of weeping side branches. So overall, a nice tree. I'm not going to talk too much in detail about each tree. It'll take too much time. Maybe a few points on other things, but but it's good that if you come by and see this tree, so you get a sense of what it looks like. Okay, so that's our silver dollar gum Eucalyptus polyanthemus. So our next tree is maintenance area, or maintenance tree. It's right next door, right next to the silver dollar gum at the corner. So it's considered a weeping tree, although this one has gotten like a sugar haircut. That's when they cut it straight across at the base and don't let it weep as much. So it's a popular tree around here in Monterey. I see it a lot. It gets usually a really bad haircut. But normally it would have a nice weeping branches close to the ground. If it's planted where there's going to be people or cars, you do have to prune it up for clearance. So it's an evergreen tree. Let's look at the foliage. So the foliage is on these really slender twigs. The leaf arrangement is opposite, and the leaves are about 1.5 inches by maybe 3/8 of an inch or 3/4 of an inch with serrated edges. So it's from Chile and Argentina and Peru, but it does well here. It's pretty drought tolerant, but it is kind of native to near streams in Peru or in Chile. The height of this tree can get up to about 40-50 feet and about 20 to 30 feet wide. This is a multi-stem, which means it has 2 trunks. Single stem would be one. And it's a tree that needs full sun. It could do well in partial shade. It likes slightly acid to highly alkaline soil. There is a nice cultivar of this, and this might be it. It's a denser, greener cultivar called Green Showers. So we'll just look under the tree here. The density is good. The problem with this tree is sometimes it will produce root sprouts at the base of the tree, the root zone, and they'll spring up all over the root zone. This one doesn't have very much, probably because it doesn't get any water. But people just hate it sometimes because it'll have all these root sprouts coming out, many feet away from the tree. Another good thing about this tree, well, that wasn't so great, but one other thing about this tree is it's resistant to oak root fungus, which we'll be seeing during our class, that a lot of the problems with trees, woody plants, is oak root fungus. So this tree doesn't look terrible, but what happens when it gets pruned too hard is that it kind of ruins the weeping form. They start, the response to hard cuts is shoots going straight up into the air instead of weeping. Eventually they do kind of weep, but you can see the difference between the weeping branches and the ones straight up. Other problems is get aphids and scale, but it's usually pretty disease free. Although, another disease it does get is actually verticillium wilt, and that's a disease where you'll see a dead branch here or there. It could eventually kill the entire tree, but usually it takes many years for that to happen. Anyway, that's our maintenance tree. So here's our tree number 3. This is the queen palm, Cyrus romanzovskiana. I guess it's named after some count. But so this is obviously a palm tree, and it's from Australia. Actually, no, it's not from Australia. It's from Brazil or South America. Uh, so it's usually a nice. These don't look so great, but usually nice, kind of low maintenance palm trees, kind of feathery looking. Just one thing: when you measure a palm tree, you just measure it up to where the fronds start. That's usually the height. So these can get up to 50 feet and about 30 feet wide. These got these long fronds, which are pinnate. They have about 7 to 15 of these fronds, and each one has these leaflets, up to 150 to 250 on each side. And they're about 3 feet long, about 1.5 inches wide. Usually green, but sometimes they can be a little chlorotic and look yellowish. And the trunk is usually going to be about 15 to 20 inches in diameter. So unfortunately I can't get close to these trees because they're behind the fence. But I'll walk up to them so you can see a little closer of the fronds. They're going to be quite different from a lot of the other palm trees we look at. Some are going to be palmate. Some are going to have long fronds like these, but the trunks are going to be very different. So these, again, they need well-drained soil, but they can pretty much grow in any type of soil. Clay, loam, sandy. From my notes, they should have more acidic soil than alkaline. Not many diseases. They do get oak root fungus, but mostly scale and spider mites. So look up these trees online, or if you have some in the neighborhood, just take a closer look at them. And that's our queen palm. Our next tree, 4, is a common white birch or European white birch, Betula pendula. It has a really nice sounding name. So this is from Europe and I think parts of Asia. It's a deciduous tree, usually upright, but some of its younger branches are kind of weeping, pendulous. And when it's young, this tree has usually a kind of a pyramidal form, but as it gets older, it's more rounded. But these trees can get pretty tall. I have a client with one of these trees that the trunk is about, I would say 3 or 4 feet diameter. I'll take a closer look. These leaves are, they got the insect damage because they look pretty, they have a lot of sooty mold. But they're serrated and sometimes they're a bit of a diamond shaped. Those are the seed pods. Here's a look from the other side. So the leaves are alternate. And actually the margins or the edges of them are double serrated. Usually a healthy tree will look a lot greener than this. This probably has aphids, which they do get when they're stressed. These trees need a lot of water. And you can see from the ground here that the grass is all dead. The other thing is that these trees are usually planted in threes, and the other 2 trees that were planted here, you can see 2 stumps. They're dead. This one has survived. But many of them didn't make, or a lot of them either got stressed or died during our long drought. Many people think or feel that we're still in a drought. So it's a tree that needs full sun, could be okay in shade, highly acidic to highly alkaline soil. It does well near the, not right at the coast, but several hundred feet away. It should do fine. There's also a nice birch related to this. It's called Betula nigra, which is a river birch, which I would plant instead of this one because it has really nice peeling bark. It makes a nice ornamental tree. So that's our common white birch or European birch. So here's our next tree. These are Italian cypress. They're conifers. Most people are familiar with these trees because they just have an unusual shape, are very columnar, and so the botanical name is Cupressus sempervirens, which means always green. You can see a few cones on these trees. So their leaves are scale-like, which very, very tiny leaves, about 1/8 of an inch long. And this particular tree, this is probably the cultivar called stricta, because the species Cupressus sempervirens is usually more broader, or it is not as compact as this, but this is the more common one that people plant. So this tree can get up to 70 feet, about 10 or 20 feet, probably 5 to 10 feet on these strictas, but probably 20 feet on the species. It is well on clay, loam, or sandy soils. They're somewhat drought tolerant, but they need to be watered. If they get stressed, they get spider mites, and they can also develop cypress canker. And they do get phytophthora, which is a root rot. So that's our Italian cypress. So this is our next tree. This is incense cedar, or Calocedrus decurrens. It's a really nice tree, one of my favorite conifers. It has a really nice form when it's young, very conical. So this tree grows from southern Oregon all the way down to Baja, in elevations from 2,000 to 7,500 feet. Nice shape. But usually as they get older, they open up a little more. There used to be one, well, there's one in Carmel that looked very nice, maybe a little taller than this, but in a storm it broke half the tree. So it's still alive, but it doesn't look as nice. With years they'll develop some character. This one looks really healthy, nice. We'll do a close-up of the kind of scale foliage. You can see some of the male cones there. They usually spread their pollen in the spring. This tree can get up to about 100 feet and about 20 to 30 feet in spread. Nice cinnamon colored trunk. It's the foliage that gives it its name, because if you crush it, it gives you a nice scent of resin. Yeah, smells like Christmas. The interior, it's mostly made up of small lateral branches, and they form most of the structure. These, a tree like this will learn with a dominant trunk, large trunk, and small branches. These are a better structure than having large side branches. So this tree does well in full sun, part shade, moist to dry soil, highly acidic or slightly alkaline. As far as fire resistance, it's favorable, meaning that it's not going to, the bark is fairly thick, it's not going to burn with just kind of grassland fires. It is susceptible to phytophthora, which is the disease of the root collar and the roots. Another disease we'll learn about later. But overall, very nice tree. It's not a garden tree, but if you have room, I would consider planting a tree like this. That's incense cedar. So our last tree for today, tree number 7, is evergreen pear, or Pyrus kawakamii, named after either a city or a person, depending on what references you look up. So this is a nice tree. It's an evergreen, well, semi-evergreen. Sometimes it does start losing its leaves as the new ones come up in the spring, but mostly it's evergreen. The leaves are alternate, simple, and kind of very, once they mature, they're very leathery, beautiful leaves. But it's mostly planted for its flowers because it has nice white flowers in the spring. And it's related to our pear tree, Pyrus communis. The problem with these trees is they do get a disease, and you can see on some of them, it's called entomosporum leaf spot. And what that does is, early in the spring, just as the new leaves are coming out, and if there's any moisture or rain, which usually does happen, it drops a lot of leaves, and then so it has to put on a whole new set of leaves, so it really stresses the tree. But it's a nice, this one has a nice structure, very nice. And what's really nice also is the bark. It has nice checkered, fissured bark as the stems mature. The fruit is, tiny little kind of round, not pear-shaped, but kind of just round-shaped fruit, which is kind of insignificant. So these trees like highly acidic and highly alkaline, two highly alkaline soils, pH. This one, like some of the trees, one of the trees we've seen today, is resistant to verticillium, but it does get that leaf spot, and it also gets fire blight like other pears. But it makes a nice landscape tree, garden tree. Not probably what you want to plant on the street because it's so wide, and so it's got to be pruned away from the street and away from the sidewalk. But overall, this is a nice little tree. There's one right over here on the street, you can see. Let's walk over to this one. So the fire blight usually affects the tips of the branches. This looks like just broken branches. But the tips start to die back, and it could actually move into the main scaffold branches and kill those. See, the bark here is not as nice as the older ones in front of the house, but you can see it's starting to develop nice bark. So that's evergreen pear, Pyrus kawakamii, from China and Taiwan. So here's a tree we were just talking about. This is an Italian cypress, but it has really bad cypress canker. See all the dead brown patches. Canker, it affects, the branches, and then it just kills off the ends of it. That's what I think. It could be something else, but I'm pretty sure that's what that is. And then right here we have a sad purple plum that's seen better days. Anyway, as you're walking around, look at the other trees. Across the street there's a holly, which we'll talk about in another class. Anyway, that's the end of our tree walk.